So, hello and welcome to the Dale Dialogue. This is Pallavi Jha. I am Managing Director of Dale Carnegie India, and we have one more episode of an interesting interaction with a very important personality in the field of HR. She has been an achiever in her own right, an influencer, and a super personality to talk with. This is Amrita Madiah, Director of Talent Development at Adobe in India. So welcome, Amrita. It's wonderful to have you on the Dale Dialogue. And it's been a while since we've actually interacted at the Dale Carnegie Expert Forum, and a lot has happened since then. I mean, nobody at that point in time really imagined this crisis as it would unfold. And as we find ourselves in the midst of something, as everybody's describing as a black swan event, something totally unexpected and unimagined, and we find ourselves in this situation, most companies are really struggling to find their feet. But the one thing that we know, the new reality, is that everyone's gone digital. And I guess companies like yours are really possibly finding their sweet spot. So are you riding against the tide and really having a good time in this crisis?
Well, thanks. Good afternoon. Thanks for having me here. And you're right, it's been a while since we spoke and a lot has happened in the world. Well, actually, that's also true between one day and the other, 1 week and the next. So much has changed around us. To your question around what's happening as an organization and what has changed for us, given the space that we work in, where we are, as an entirely digital organization, where we're actually, enabling the world through digital experiences, one of the, fallouts really of this situation has been the very immediate need for businesses to go digital more than before. Of course, that's always been the journey that we've been on. But I think now there's two things. One is there's a piece which is, as a business, what we can do and how we can really support our customers and new customer groups. The other is really what we're able to do for people who are our customers already. And what are we doing to support them through this situation, in terms of not just products and services, but also just the way we engage with them, what support we're able to provide them. And I think from that perspective, you think about it, whether it's schools and school children, it's governments, whether it's businesses or communities, going digital in the past, maybe for many of them has been a business requirement, and for many others, it may have also been an element of sustainability and things like that, or collaboration. At this point, it's all of that, plus business sustenance and success. And so I think that's the bigger piece that we are really looking at and seeing so much more everywhere. And so I use the term about governments because that's where you see the most amount of human interaction, at large scale. And really, what does that mean, therefore, for common citizens in different countries and how they engage with all the paperwork that's involved, etc., to kids in school, missing the whole, personal interaction that you can actually have, to the element of creativity, which is where we play in very significantly in a large suite of products. So absolutely. Yes, a lot of different things that we can do, huge opportunity for us. And something I can say for sure, we have our heads down trying to solve for as well. So yes, good times, but also very creative times.
Absolutely, I'm sure of that. I'm just thinking about what challenges some companies have faced, really seeing their businesses come to a standstill and trying to reinvent themselves as digital businesses. But you always have been a digital business. So is it business as usual, just looking to scale up? Or is it different in the kind of, did you have to sit down and redraw any of your plans, for instance?
Definitely have to reprioritize. I think that's a word that we use consistently. And that's because of the fact that you really can't continue to do business the way you did before. It isn't the same world. So I think reprioritization has been a big word for us. And it's something that we've done right from, the CEO downwards. We constantly ask ourselves those questions around what needs to be done. And I think, therefore, focusing on the critical few, as well as not losing, sight of what, like I said earlier, what do our customers need the most today, has been the balance out that we have kept in mind. And I don't think it's limited to business. I'd say even in HR or employee experiences, we call it.
Right.
Really, that's been the focus. So right down to all functions within the organization, that's definitely been one of the big areas. Yeah.
Right, right, absolutely, and that kind of makes me think about the fact that today most leadership is really focused on how to manage the immediate impact of COVID, and every decision that we are taking or not taking is actually going to have a long-term impact on the culture of the organization. So you mentioned employee experience. In what ways do you see, maybe in the IT sector, maybe you've seen something in Adobe, but maybe generally in the IT sector or with your clients? Where do you see shifts in the culture really happening, especially with the kind of decisions people are taking at the moment?
So, culture is a great question and something that we talk about very often as well, right? In terms of what is the impact of um, this change in the way we do business to everything else in the way we engage with one another. And it's also something that, honestly, I think we've tried to keep a very close connect with ever since we got on this journey, let's say early March at Adobe. Let's start with the fact that all of the actions that we've been taking, we've tried to make sure that they're very aligned to our values and therefore in some way impact our culture, right? And I would think that might be a yardstick for a lot of organizations as well, in terms of let's not disrupt what we've built very painstakingly over time to be our culture because of a situation that has changed. How can we continue to be agile while we hold true to that? And so if I were to use Adobe as an example, I'd say just from the fact that we kept employees at the heart of everything that we did, really embodied everything that we stand for in terms of our values. So being genuine and making sure that right from the CEO to all other top leadership, that there was a very immediate, personal connect with employees, talking through what's going on. I think being extremely truthful about the situation we're in and what we're trying to do, and to keep employee comfort and safety first before everything else, really dominated a significant portion of the beginning of these, let's say, last 4 months. So I think for organizations as well, just the how do you make sure you continue to do business without losing what's core to you can't be very easy, but I would think that's one. Then there's the other piece around culture in terms of, let's say, things like how do you treat one another, right? And if you say treating each other with respect is our culture, or we are a very warm culture. We really build strong relationships. Then what happens to meetings and conversations where you don't lose that piece around relationships and warmth because you're so busy trying to get stuff done, or there's a lot of panic and anxiety? I think keeping these threads going through every communication, every conversation, every action and decision for us has been invaluable. I would think that's a really important element for culture. I think the other is how much of this culture is built from being physically in the same space, right? We associate a lot with our physical workspaces, with activities that we can do together. And therefore, that's why I go back to saying, what are the values that drives this culture within the organization and how can you hold true to that? I think that's extremely important. And probably the last thing to say is I do think that EQ is making a huge comeback today more than it ever did before, because that's what's the call for action right at the beginning. It is
Right.
about slow down, let's give everybody time and space to adjust, things will happen. And that in many ways is a reflection of culture. What we can't do is, what is the workplace culture like? Which we have now it's become part of your home and workplace culture. It's the right thing to do. I think the challenge is how do you sustain this over a very long period of time? Because it's very difficult to maintain culture over a distributed set of people. It's always easier. All the markers of culture are more physical for us, and
Right.
we see them in the office. So I think that's the hard part, which I guess maybe other organizations must be struggling with. And I think for us, like I told you, every action that we have with employees, as managers, as leaders, is somehow tied back to these values, and that's really helped us probably stay on board till now.
No, that's fantastic. It's great to hear words like genuine and honest and truthful, because, that sense of authenticity and caring, as you mentioned, really builds that trust, which is so critical when you're really not in, physical proximity, understanding body language and building. So I think leading through trust is going to be even more important in today. And it's a huge leadership challenge, really. But tell me, we talked about really things that are happening and how they're changing and what we should not be losing. But there will be some, I mean, it is a new reality. And there will be things that will no longer be true, or we will lose some part of how we used to work. And is there anything that you're, feeling that we are going to lose in this work from home, remote working kind of an environment, which is here to stay, and that you wouldn't want to lose?
So the last sentence is the hardest, the want to lose. I don't know how much of a choice we have in some of these things. I think it's more around the how do we make sure we don't lose something despite the circumstances,
Right.
something that we hold dear.
Yeah.
For example, like I was just saying, the whole, missing coffee conversations. I've heard this come up in multiple forums. Obviously, you must have heard the same, where everyone's saying, look, the whole human contact is just so important, and we're realizing it more now than ever before, simply because we can't go back to work. And for many of us, we don't know when we're going back to work. And if we do, what that's even going to look like. So I think clearly ability to engage in person is definitely at risk. What you don't want to lose is, for example, the opportunity to collaborate, because when people are together and in dialogue is when a lot of ideas spark, or there's creative sparring, and how much of that can actually happen virtually. I do think that's something that we're thinking about. I'm sure organizations are seeing it elsewhere as well, is how long will virtual hold up? And at what point will you start to feel like this is really tiring? It would have been much better if we were in person, or you could whiteboard. So clearly there's a lot of technology to help. So that's one piece of being in person. The other is just coffee corridor conversations, which is something people definitely miss. I know I miss that, about not being able to see team members in person or bump into somebody and have a conversation. In fact, that's probably literally zero right now, because the only time you can have a conversation with someone who's not in your regular relative, if you go out there and set up a calendar invitation or make the effort to call them, because you're never going to bump into them.
Right. And so tell me, as somebody who's really heading talent development, where do you see the trends in what kind of competencies, what kind of skills are you betting on? And what would you like to see in your organization?
So I think two things, Pallavi. One is really, what does the organization really need at this time? And how much of what used to hold true before we got into this COVID situation, and whatever the future looks like, how much of that continues? And then therefore, what do we need to change? And I think one of the big things I have been watching very closely, I think it's too early to say this is absolutely what we need to do differently, but most definitely what we're watching is, I think, the kind of leadership we're asking our leaders to demonstrate today is really not just about execution, right? Because that's
Right.
something how to do in a different world. And you know what? You have to get business done. You'll figure out how to execute in a new world order. But is that what your team is really, looking up to you for today? I doubt that it's only limited to, direction and orders and how to do stuff, or how do we get things done. That's how we're typically hardwired. I think it's, like I said, EQ is making a comeback in a way. In my mind is more, how do you really cope with what people are experiencing at a very human level, at a personal level? And those are things, just as a simple example, I think there are more conversations today that start with just the way you and I started, is just, how are you? And it's not the, hey, how you doing kind of conversation you say as you pass somebody by. It's very meaningful. I don't think that's something that I would have stopped and said, why are you asking me this again? If it had been 6 months ago, it would have been a little strange. Today, it's very meaningful. And we've seen this happen, for example, with our customers, where we know that when we're speaking to our customers, we've made deliberate efforts to actually not go down the path of what's your problem or here's the solution, to how are you doing? what's going on in your business. And we've had such positive responses from customers saying, thank you, no one asked me this. Or I'm so touched that you chose to ask me versus sell me something. So I think that whole element around being less of a executor and more of a human and interacting at that level, I think is something we definitely need to focus on.
Absolutely.
And I think being remote brings all those challenges, right? Those of us that relied very heavily on being able to connect because we're in person are definitely challenged. And what does that mean? You know, how will you work differently? You also brought up trust earlier. I think it started there. How can I trust that work will still get done, that I need to back off and pay attention to the more important piece, which is everybody's safety and comfort, before I worry about how things got done, I think is what started us on this journey. Right. And hopefully in our organization and in others, that's, you know, the threshold we've crossed. And we're now talking about, okay, now how do we accelerate what we're doing? So to me, those are the real basics from the perspective of what do we think is required. Then, of course, the how do you make it happen? We're in a tech world, we're a tech company, we're digital.
Absolutely.
So shouldn't be a challenge for us, though we really do rack our brains on how to make that happen. But yeah, how much capacity do your learners have today for learning? When I say capacity, just imagine that my whole world is this laptop today. And the only time I get a change of scene is if I look over the laptop out ahead of what's behind, or, you know.
Right.
So I think the approach has got to be far more learner-centric today than ever before. Seems like a very common sense thing, but you know, I believe it's getting challenged every day. So how much bandwidth and mind space does your learner have? Right. Realistically, if it suits your need, if it speaks to your purpose, and if it actually matches what makes it comfortable for them, so they don't feel like they're really killing themselves to learn, it should work. Really, that's what I'm thinking about. 90 minutes sometimes feels like too much. 60 works better, 30 works better. And now I'm seeing even 90-second videos are making a big difference. So I really think we've got to rethink how we think of time, mind space, and content, because this is not about giving people a full buffet. This is really probably, you know, a degustation menu. You just want a little bit. And that's probably how learning is going to look, and nothing wrong with it. Why not?
Yeah, absolutely. And we've been having these trends of the shortening attention span and micro learning and nuggets, and so journeys that take you to overcome the forgetting curve. And you know, obviously at Dale Carnegie, we've been studying a lot of that. Yeah. And in our experience, you know, technology is a great enabler, because today you do have platforms that allow you a lot of engagement and interaction. But at the end of the day, you know, even like in the good old classroom environment, the trainer made all the difference. I think it's the coaching. I think it's the coaching, the methodology that is accompanying or that is leveraging the technology. That is in our experience, what's the differentiator? Is at the end of the day, we sometimes very often just look at engagement, because, you know, disengagement is very easy when you're online. You know, you can walk on, you can answer, you know, you can clear an email aside, you can be highly distracted, and therefore you have only partial attention. But, you know, there are great tools that have been built in. How to use those tools and then do coaching to elevate the skill or the knowledge is really the key. And therefore, I think in our experience, learning has really not fundamentally changed. It's just, we called it move the room internally. We just said from the classroom to the virtual room, but we just continued to do what we were doing to great results. And, you know, at Dale Carnegie, these are highly emotional experiences because we believe that unless you personally feel it, you're not going to make up your mind to change, especially in your behavioral skills. So that's really quite amazing. Are there any crowning comments, in a sense, that you would like to give in terms of what people should look forward to, maybe in the world of HR or learning or anything like that, over the next 6 to 12 months or even the next 3-4 years?
So I think the fact that, you know, virtual experiences have been around for a very long time, but how we, like you rightly said, rethink what this virtual experience is going to look like, and how well are we able to, you know, continue to maintain connections connection with your purpose, connection with you as an individual, connection with what's important to you. All of these things, I think, really needs to be front and center of anything that we are planning. And like you said, people do want to interact. People do want to feel like you're speaking to me. I'm not just another one of 5,000 people, even if I am in a large group.
Yes. So Amrita, we always end the Dale dialogue with the final question, which is always related to our famous Dale Carnegie human relations principles, and you're familiar with them. Can you tell me which is the one principle that resonates with you the most, possibly you saw in action, and that's why you believe in it the most?
I find this question really difficult, because the things that you've have listed and what I've read about all of the work that you do, it's very, very hard. But let me pick for right now, be a leader, for a couple of reasons. One, it's also one of Adobe's leadership capabilities. And therefore, there's a lot of resonance in the work that we're doing today, or the way I'm thinking about it and what I'm seeing around me as well.
Absolutely. So that's wonderful. So there's leadership, and a leadership that values others and makes the other person feel important, is listening to others and leading the way. I think that's really what Dale Carnegie is all about as well. And great to hear that you like that piece. So thank you so much, Amrita, for making time for the Dale Dialogue. It was wonderful to have you. Great insights, as usual.
Thanks, likewise. It's great answering these questions, and I'm going to have to think a little harder now at some of the questions you asked about. All right, so what else do I know about this, and how much more will I find out along the way? Thanks, great questions as well, and lovely talking to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.